like I got the Woods getting at me, then I got the Norteños getting at me. Oh, Guerrero, Tito, oh, you Northern Mexican, right? I'm like, nah, homie, I ain't. Oh, you Wood Pile, oh, Wood Pile. I'm like, nah, homie, I'm a other man, you know. And then the Uso Mick was there, and like, had to go and get me moved around. Like, yeah, it was crazy, man. So it was crazy.
So meeting the homies there and being introduced to the car, you know, what was that experience like? You know, you meet the homies, and were they doing kind of the same thing, looking at you like, you sure you are other? You know, were they doing?
They were. I mean, and that's where I'm almost glad I did so much time in county, because I was kind of a little versed already when I got there. Like if I went straight to prison, I don't know what would have happened, man. But
so you got schooled before you went there.
Yeah, you know, okay. I got schooled good, and so I was kind of like, look, man, I ain't gonna ride with no Mexicans. I ain't gonna ride with no whites. Like I'm Latin. I'm from South America, you know, and all my friends outside are Asian and Islanders anyway. Might as well just keep running that. And so it worked out. I mean, I'm lucky in that respect. But we both know, like, there's other Peruvians that show up and they run Paiso, they run with the Mexicans and stuff, you know, and that's, I mean, what if you have the luxury and you're going to go with what you're comfortable. The same way we got homies that run with Crips and Bloods and Northerners and Southerners, you know? So, I mean, yeah, it was weird, but then it was also weird, like being at Solano, and then homies would show up from San Quentin, and I'd be telling JP, oh yeah, I was there. Oh, well, you need to go school them. All right, let me go hit a lab and let them know what's going on.
Right. So, yeah, so you did, yeah. So you eventually went to Solano from San Quentin, but what was, you know, when you got to Solano, let me ask you this. I wasn't there when you first showed up because I was still in high desert. And so you hit level 3 Solano. JP was there, right?
Yep.
Okay, so when you got there, did you have any issues as far as getting involved in the program there, or was it just, you know, open arms and right to programming?
It was right to programming, and that's because of Mick over in Quentin. So when they called me to go, they didn't tell me where I was going. They didn't know where I was going. They just said, you know, pack your stuff. So I went down to R&R, and they had me outside in a little cage off area, and Mick was walking to go over to work. He's like, what's up, Moose? Where you going? I'm like, man, I don't even know. He's like, hold up. And he went inside. He comes out and he's like, man, you either going to Vacaville or Solano. He was like, you go to Solano, go see JP. And I think he just said, man, tell him Uso Mick sends his love and I'll talk to him soon. And I was like, all right, get on the bus. I didn't know until I got there that I was going to Solano. And so I get there and I'm like, where are we at? They're like, this is Solano. I'm like, all right. Just happened to end up on one yard where JP was. And so I got there, and once again, getting hit up by white boys and stuff. And then Filipino Cisco was there, and he was in Quinn with me. So he's like, what's up? And so we get to chopping it up, go out to yard. I see JP, and I'm like, hey, man, Uso Mick said he sends his love, and he's going to be in touch with you soon. He's like, all right, cool. Here's what you need to do. And he started running down the program to me, and I was like, all right. And I mean, the only thing that was different there, and now I think about it, I don't even think JP did this with everyone. I think this was almost just a me thing, but he gave me some weed to hold, like right when they got me moved into one building, which was like a couple days because I was close A. Comes up to the cell, he's like, hey, I need you to hold this for a few days. And I'm like, oh shit, right? And I don't even have no property. I ain't got nowhere to hide it. I'm like, I'm not hooping this. I ain't doing none of that. So I'm stressed the fuck out. Freaking goon squad coming in the building. I'm all freaking wondering what I'm gonna do. Comes back a couple days later. He's like, you got that? I'm like, yeah, here. He's like, all right. And I'm like, okay, that must have been a test. I'm good now. Next thing, he slides a piece under the door to me. Hey, I need you to hold that, take it to yard. I'm like, oh, all right. So go to yard. Every time an S&E walking by, I'm hitting the lap, I'm going around, and After a couple of days, he's like, all right, you got that? I'm like, yeah, here. He's like, all right, Oos. And then I'm just waiting for the next thing. That was it. Nothing else ever came. So that was my little, am I going to do it? And, I'm telling myself, I'm like, man, I'm a lifer. I didn't do no level 4 time. I came straight here. Like, they just want to make sure that, it's a test. I guess I passed. That was it. And so that was my little 2 ordeals with, I guess, showing I had heart or whatever the hell you want to call it.
Yeah. Rest in peace to the Uso Jp, man.
Most definitely.
Good Us. So tell us, man, through your whole time in prison, did you ever have to defend yourself or anything like that? Maybe get into a fight or have to put in some work, besides, being tested or anything like that? Did you ever have to really get into an altercation with somebody and really handle your business? Or was it pretty much just a clean slate through?
You know what? It was pretty much clean all the way through. There was a few times, right, where some stuff happened. I'll give an example. In one building, I forget the dude's name. It was an OG black dude, ran the squares for the football pool and stuff. And I remember I had some kind of generic cigarettes, and he had told me, oh yeah, they're worth this much. So I got my squares, and then I hid. And when I went to go get my money, he's like, oh no, these are only worth this much. So I took that square away, and that's the one that won. And I'm like, how the hell are you going to take the winning square away? And, you didn't even come tell me. And so I was like, you know what, I'll holler at you in a minute. And Isaiah was there, Tonga Isaiah, right? When you got there, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Isaiah and Sione, right? I'm talking and they're like, man, fuck that. We gonna go Fossey this fool. And I'm like, man, that fool's hella old. Like, y'all gonna kill that dude. And I was like, you ain't gotta fight no fights for me. And they're like, let's just go talk to him. And I'm like, all right. So we go up. Everyone listening, Isaiah wasn't huge, but he was a big dude, right? But he was not huge. Now, Sione, that motherfucker was 19 years old, Samoan, and like tall and big, right? So I got these 2 big ass dudes standing on each side of the door. I'm standing in the middle, and I'm talking to this dude, and he's just backing up, grabbing books, grabbing all kind of he's grabbing anything he can do. And like, I wouldn't be surprised if he pissed his pants, because they're sitting there like talking, and I don't know a whole lot of Samoan, but I know Fossey is beat someone up and like, and like the Meuli and all this stuff. So I'm hearing them, and they're getting ready to just go in and fuck them up. And I'm like, you know what? You ain't running your football shit with none of the homies no more. Don't bring that shit around our table. Don't do none of that shit. That's just it. And I shut the door on them, and they're like, what's up, Bruce? And I'm like, hey man, I appreciate it, but nah, I ain't gonna let no one fight. They're like, no, homie, you a lifer. We ain't lifers. We're gonna go handle that. I'm like, nah, it's straight. And then the only other time, and this fast forward to right before I got out, you were already gone.
Okay.
But when I had the issue with Puerto Rican Julio, I don't know. Okay. Did you hear about that?
No, yeah. I didn't. No.
So, and mind you, this is going to sound funny to some people. Some of y'all might think I'm a punk or whatever. Quite honestly, fuck you, come say it to my face. But
fuck it.
but this is the thing, right? So right before I got out, I was really focused on bettering myself and trying to better anyone around me that I could. And Julio was one of these dudes in and out, right? Drug problems, everything else, right? Right. And so I was working with the dude, right? And this is a big ass Puerto Rican dude, like a boxer dude, right? Like huge.
Yeah, Julio.
Short, but he was big, right? He looked like a little monkey, right? But so I'm letting him use my cell phones and all this other stuff. He was kicking it with chemo, fucking all that shit, right? And chemo always talking him up and shit. Needs to say he messing with a bunch of bras on my phone. And then they call in and stuff. I'm like, dude, tell your bras not to call. Like, you got this time. You use a phone more than I do. I just need it for 2 hours a night to check in on people, right? Needs to say these bras are like, oh, Tito said it's his phone. I thought it was your phone. And so now he's thinking like I'm hating on him. I'm like, motherfucker, it's my phone, but whatever.
Right.
It gets to a point where I'm like, this fool's letting chemo talk to him and everything else. Like, he's ready to fight over something that ain't even his, right? And I'm literally talking to a girl myself, and I'm like, I think this dude's going to want to fight me. And she's like, so are you going to fight him? I'm like, no, I'm not. I go, matter of fact, everything in my experience tells me lace up my shoes and go up there ready. I'm not going to do it. She's like, why would you not do that? And I'm like, because I've invested time and effort in this dude. I need to walk the line now. Like, if I go back to that, then why even waste my time trying to make them better, right?
Right.
So they were up in, what was that? M dorm on the other side, right? That was the other corner of the fighting dorm.
That was my dorm. Yeah.
Oh, that was your dorm. What's the other side? L? No.
L, you know what? I don't remember, but I remember who was over
there.
there.
Yeah, whatever the opposite side was. So, yeah. So I go up there, I'm in flip-flops, I got my cup of little water and shit. And he said one of the girls' names. He's like, and he's all squared off and everything. And I'm like, I swear I can't make this shit up. In my mind, I'm like, I'm going to lean forward and if he wants to hit me, hit me. Like, in my mind. And that other thing in the back of your head was going, don't do it. And I'm like, nope. And I went, what'd you say? And he sucker punched me. Bam. I spilled a little bit of my water and I went back to the mirror and I looked like a little tiny red mark. I'm like, I'm good. And I'm like, you done? And everyone in the dorm was like, what the hell? And he's all, come on. And I'm like, I ain't gonna fight you over no stupid broad, man. What the hell, dude? And he's like, well, I'm gonna keep the phone. I'm like, I'll turn it off tonight. You act like I don't have more. I'm like, that's your loss. I was like, it's all good, man. He's all, you ain't gonna fight me? I'm like, why? And I walk out the dorm and Johnny Boy and them were right there next door, right in W dorm. And I fucked up and I blew my nose. So I got a black eye, right?
Oh, no.
But now I got to go do I fell off my bunk shit, right? And try to cover it up. But when he hit me, he fractured my bone. So I couldn't chew. So the next day I was like, fuck, man, I gotta go get some ibuprofen or something, right? And when they saw me, they were like, nope, fucking cuffed me up. And they apparently had already got kites about everything that happened, right? So they got me sitting there in cuffs and they're like, the sergeant, I don't remember his name, he's a piece of shit. I hope he gets whatever he got coming. But he's like, man, we already know who did it. And I'm like, okay, cool. I fell off the bunk, so I don't know what you're talking about. And they're like, oh yeah? He's got a little paper. He's like, oh, you're going home in a year. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, you know, when I go through your property and I find that piece, you're going to get at least another year. And I'm like, oh, you what? And he's like, yeah, you know, we find pieces of property all the time. And I was like, man, fuck you, we're done. Go find whatever the fuck you need to. Fuck you. And he's like, oh, you think talking shit's gonna help you? And I'm like, fuck you, fuck your mom, fuck your whole family. Don't fucking threaten me, man. I got 11 years in. Like, no, don't fucking start that shit now. And he's like, get him the fuck out of here. And the S&E cop, he's like, hey, Guerrero, man. I was like, man, fuck you. That dude just threatened me. Do your job. Go report him. I was like, otherwise don't say shit to me, man. Took me to the hole, did 6 months there, and then Associate Warden Nuring, who was a sergeant when I was a captain's clerk way back in the day, he kept pulling me to ICC and he's like, dude, we already know who it is. Once you tell on M.A. Rodriguez, we're going to fucking give him 10 years for that. And I'm like, okay, I can parole from here. I fucking lost an extra 10 pounds. I'm looking good, bro. Like, I'm straight. Like, man, fuck you. I'm gonna send you back to the 3 yard. I'm like, cool. Can I get back to 13? Because I want to get back to my building, man. He was pissed. He's like, fuck you. I'm letting you out today. I'm like, cool. Did my last 6 months. Fucking as soon as I got back to the yard, everyone's like, man, you held your mud. You didn't tell. And I'm like, fuck, what'd you guys think? I'm like, man, it's whatever, right? Go to yard. Here comes Julio. Comes walking up. Everyone's all, he's like, hey, man, can I hug you? I'm like, what's up, homie? Like, what's up? And he's all, man, he goes, they came and talked to me, man. They said, as soon as you say something, I'm going out to the DA. And I'm like, okay. Obviously, you're still here, right? He's like, fucking 6 months. And I was like, yeah, motherfucker, try it on the other side. Yeah, that shit wasn't cool. He's like, I know it ain't going to make up for it, but I got some for you at Unlock. And I was like, all right. He goes in the building. When he comes out, manila envelope, felt like the fucking court thing on the appeal. He's like, here. And I'm like, he got his GED while I was in there. That made all that shit worth it.
Because you were actually helping him before, right? To get his
I was
his
pushing him to get his GED, like whatever he could do to give himself a fighting chance when he gets out.
You know,
so to this day, I got a fucking titanium plate here. And as much as I don't like it, and I don't like that it feels weird every once in a while, I do it again.
See, that's what I'm talking about with you, you know, in a situation like that, you know, you saw the bigger picture. Because at the end of the day, if he would have went to the DA, caught more time or anything, do you think he would have learned anything? No, he would have been bitter, angry, hateful, spiteful, you know, all that shit. But instead, he saw that you showed him love in the end and made sure that he still was able to go home. And not only that, you were the motherfucker that was helping him trying to get his education. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, but that's how it is in prison, man. People will be your homie 1 minute, and then the next minute, you know, it could be your enemy.